Good morning and welcome back to another Eduro Learning Facebook Live session. Today's topic is Citizenship Digital? And it's a topic I'm really interested in because it's one I've been talking about with friends and colleagues for many years now. I think in schools we do a lot of work around digital citizenship, and there's a lot of concern, particularly when you're moving towards a technology-rich environment, to ensure that students are feeling really confident in their digital citizenship skills. So today's topic is kind of a little bit of a twist on that. The question is citizenship digital? And I think we kind of start thinking about that question in the sense that we really want to make sure that kids have those digital citizenship skills, but we often forget how great we are at teaching actual citizenship skills. This is something we're really confident in as teachers, that we do in our classrooms all the time. We talk about behavior and safety and responsibility and all of those things in our classroom. We know how to do this in a face-to-face context. And I'm going to talk today about how there are so many parallels to a digital context, so that the question then becomes, for me personally, is citizenship digital, or is it just the same thing in face-to-face and in digital contexts? It's just citizenship. So I would love to hear your thoughts as we kind of go through this talk, either live here in the chat now or later on in the comments in this video playback. So really the question is, we know how to teach citizenship. Does that mean as teachers we know how to teach digital citizenship, and that it doesn't really need to be a distinct, separate thing? And so I'm going to talk about kind of 6 themes that I think make pretty clear parallels from face-to-face to the digital world. And I don't think they're like black and white or exact or distinct separate things, but they kind of all merge together and form this picture of what citizenship looks like, in my opinion, in both a face-to-face setting and a digital setting. So I'm going to talk about 6 things, and then I have 3 kind of themes that I want to kind of summarize with at the very end. So when I think about digital citizenship or citizenship in general, I kind of think about these like overarching kind of behaviors and habits that we might have. So things like behavior, responsibility, safety, community, advocacy and action, and then rights and responsibilities. And as usual, if you see me looking over to the side here, it's because that's where my notes are. So I'm going to glance down there every now and again. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about each of those and kind of talk about what I see as the parallel in the face-to-face environment and the digital environment when we're looking at this as citizenship in 2 contexts, but still the same essential underlying skill. So the first one I'd love to talk about is behavior. And when we talk about good behavior in the classroom, we talk about being kind, talk about looking out for other people, making good choices, and being respectful. And we can also look at behavior in a digital context. We can look at how we comment back to people, how we start off with a positive comment and then we give some constructive feedback, and then maybe we close with a positive comment again. We can talk about being polite and kind in virtual environments. We can talk about how we share what we think in a way that will help people understand that, as opposed to being confrontational or aggressive. We can talk about making sure that what we use and take from sources online is legal, like don't steal. So we don't steal in the real world, and we can try to talk about not stealing in the digital world as well. So again, those aren't perfectly black and white or perfectly matched up, but the kind of theme of good behavior fits really well in a face-to-face context that we're really comfortable teaching, and it also fits really well in a digital context. So that's my first one, and I'm going to do the same thing for 5 other themes. My second theme is responsibility. And when you think about that in a face-to-face context, we think about taking care of yourself, taking care of your belongings, taking care of your body, taking care of your needs, and being respectful of other people. So being respectful of what other people need, being respectful in your communication, being respectful of goods and products that are around you, being respectful of spaces. And we can do exactly the same thing in a digital context. We can be responsible for our devices. We can be responsible for what we share and how we share it. We can talk about making good choices. We can talk about citing sources. So those are ways to be responsible in a digital environment. So you can talk about responsibility in both environments. My third key theme is safety. And when we talk about safety in a face-to-face setting, we might talk about not talking to strangers, or not going down a dark alley late at night, or not giving out your phone number to someone you don't know, or walking home with someone you don't know, just kind of physical safety. And in an online environment, we can talk about online safety. And it's, again, very similar. Think before you post. Don't share things that you don't want the public to know. Make sure your digital footprint represents you in a positive way. So think about how you share representing you to a wider audience. Things that you wouldn't tell to strangers in a face-to-face setting, you probably wouldn't want to tell to strangers in a digital setting. And then things like using smart passwords and being secure with what you share, and how you connect to the internet and connect to the spaces that you use on the internet. So that's safety, my third topic. My fourth topic about citizenship is community. And I kind of just have a summary statement for this one because I think it all fits together. When you are moving to a new place, you don't just think about the physical space you're going to occupy. You think about the people that are around you, the location of where you're going to be living. Talk about being choosy and careful about where we go and what we do, because that's really important for our own safety, our happiness, and our well-being. And when we choose that neighborhood really carefully about where we're going to live in the real world, we can think about our online neighborhood or community or network in a very similar way. Make the choice about who you spend time with and where you spend time and what you do there the same way you would make that choice in a face-to-face setting. So the care that you take in perhaps like buying a home and making the choice and where you're going to buy your home, you can take that same care in the community that you build and become part of and develop in online spaces as well. My fifth item is about action and advocacy, and I think one of the elements of citizenship that we talk about a lot in school is our responsibility to take action and be advocates for those who are less fortunate. So you can think about things like community service, that's really highly prioritized in schools, participating in your government in whatever way that works in the country that you're in. I'm thinking about supporting causes that you believe in and that you're passionate about. And in the digital space, we can do exactly the same thing. We can support causes, we can share information about causes, we can speak up when we feel like something is not right, and we can take action in a virtual environment the same way we would do so in a physical environment. And a lot of times I think maybe there's a little bit of a stigma about kind of like standing up and being passionate in virtual spaces because it's a lot easier than doing that in physical spaces. So this is kind of an interesting one where I think we're maybe more comfortable or find it easier to be an active advocate in a virtual space than maybe sometimes it is in a physical space. And then my last one, my sixth one that fits in with the kind of citizenship theme is your rights. And when we talk about citizenship in schools, we talk about your rights as a citizen, you know, freedom of speech and be able to be safe out on the streets, and you're able to participate in government, that there's social infrastructure or physical infrastructure for you to rely on, like roads and trains and all that kind of stuff. And in digital spaces, I think we have similar things, and maybe it's a little bit more about our individual freedom because kind of the internet is that kind of Wild West space right now, but you do have the freedom to connect with whoever you want. You have the freedom to share whatever you want. You have the freedom even to kind of take whatever you can take in those spaces. And so thinking about your rights in a face-to-face environment and how they can kind of parallel into that digital environment as well. So those 6 themes kind of citizenship, I think provide really nice parallels that fit for face-to-face and digital settings. And I think the idea is to talk about those things naturally together. When you're learning about citizenship and safety and responsibility and advocacy and all those things in the classroom, you can talk about those face-to-face skills that you're really confident with, that you've been doing for years as a teacher, and also make that connection or that parallel to those digital spaces. And it doesn't mean that each of these are so separate and distinct that you talk about one at a time. They will blend and merge together. But the idea is you actually really do have these skills to talk about digital citizenship. And I think the idea is just to kind of make that connection for kids, because their really comfortable environment might be in those digital spaces that might be less comfortable for the teacher, but you already do know a lot about that because you've been teaching citizenship for your entire career, right? So that's kind of the theme, is that I think citizenship is a series of choices and behaviors and habits and attitudes that you take into your daily life, and you take them in your face-to-face interactions the same way you take them in your digital interactions. So if we can make that parallel clear for kids, the choices they make in a digital space will be very similar to the choices they would make in a face-to-face space. That does mean, though, that we have to remember The experiences, so these are the three things I want to remember that I wanted to say at the end. These experiences that they have in face-to-face settings and digital settings are not exactly the same, right? The parallel that I immediately think of is bullying. And when you think about bullying in a face-to-face setting, there's usually like some reprieve. It might happen on the playground or the bus, but then you go home and you're separate from it. You don't have to experience it anymore for at least several hours, right? But if you're thinking about bullying in a digital sense, we would often call cyberbullying, sometimes that can be like unrelenting, right? Text messages that can come anytime. The fact that you can physically read through them means you can read them over and over again, which means you don't really forget about what happened because it hurts fresh every time. So it's not like these experiences are all going to be exactly the same. But the key is, as a teacher, you have lots of face-to-face examples that you're really confident and comfortable with that you can pull from if some of these digital challenges happen in your classroom. So it's not a perfect parallel and it's not entirely consistent every single time, but that connection can be easily made. Cyberbullying is very similar to face-to-face bullying. We need to deal with it the way we deal with face-to-face bullying, but we know that the experience might feel different to kids. So the key is that you have those skills and you know you can teach them and you just need to apply them in multiple contexts. The second thing I wanted to bring up that's kind of an overarching theme that's something for us to consider is that cultural norms change, right? Over time, norms change. What is socially acceptable today may not have been socially acceptable when we were kids. And we, as adults, I know I do this all the time, I have this expectation that kids know what my cultural norms are. Kids know that I think they shouldn't write in text speech, or kids know that I think that they shouldn't plagiarize, right? But maybe they don't know this because their cultural norms are different. So there's two kind of elements that go with that. One is, as teachers, I do think we need to, I don't know if accept is the right word, but at least be aware that those norms have changed and our expectations may not be clear to kids. So we might have to recognize that things are different today and see how much are we kind of willing to tolerate. And is it worth getting into a battle over whether or not the cell phone is out in class if all the student is doing is looking up some information that maybe you used to do in a book? So there's one thing is like kind of accepting that cultural norms are different now, figuring out what those are and seeing what you're willing to deal with or encourage or allow in your classroom. And then the second thing is, once you know what those cultural norms are and you know what's different about what kids think is normal versus what you think is normal, there might need to be some reteaching. And one of the things that I feel like I'm always talking about with my colleagues is like, kids need to know what the limit is. And maybe you think the limit is really obvious and you want them to know that somehow inherently, but actually maybe you need to just reteach. Like, be explicit and tell them it's not okay, for example, that you pull your phone out during my lesson. If that's something that's not okay for you or not okay in your school setting, it may need to be really explicit what is appropriate behavior today in your classroom, because their outside of the classroom behavior might be very different than what you expect in your classroom. So there's kind of this acceptance and there's also this like reteaching that might need to happen. And then my third thing is, I think this is just kind of an interesting thing to think about. When we teach citizenship in class, we almost always have like real life examples of who's a great citizen that we can point to. And I just wonder, do we have examples of great digital citizenship choices in action that we can point to? People that kids know and that they can respect and that they can kind of aspire to be like. So you look at this person is a great citizen, you want to be like them. Do we have those same kind of role models for good choices in digital citizenship? And if we don't in our classroom, can we find ways to bring those in? Tap into behavior that we see that's really positive that kids are doing in online, because there is a lot of positive stuff going on, or even pulling from, you know, real world examples, whether it's on like a talk show or something like that, where people are making great choices in digital spaces and sharing those with kids so they have inspiration and something to look up to while they're, you know, learning how to make those good choices. So that's everything I wanted to talk about today. It took a little bit of a longer time than last time, about 15 minutes. But my kind of big overarching theme is that citizenship in my opinion, is just citizenship. And I can credit Robin Treybaud for really prompting this thinking in me many, many years ago. And I'm really glad that it's still relevant today. And the idea is that we know how to teach citizenship. We know what those elements are. If we can make the parallels between that face-to-face environment and context that we're really familiar with a digital environment, we can help kids build strong skills that help them make good choices and habits in the everyday interactions that they take, both in a face-to-face setting and a digital setting, and to see that those are connected and related. We can help build great citizens, both in a face-to-face environment and a digital environment, kind of at the same time. So I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there something I totally missed in here? Is there something that you think is really different about kind of digital interaction that I haven't addressed, that is not kind of part of what we would consider like regular citizenship? I would love to hear that and kind of talk about how you think that looks, maybe for you as a teacher or even for you as a parent, because I know it can look a little bit different. So thank you so much for spending 16 minutes with me. We're super excited about all of these Facebook Lives that we're sharing, because they're actually leading up to something really exciting, which is the launch of our new micro-credentials. And one of those micro-credentials is called the Connected Teacher. And in that micro-credential, we're going to talk about how you can bring digital citizenship into your classroom in a way that's authentic and purposeful and matches with what you already teach about citizenship. So for the teacher that wants to connect their classroom to each other, to the school, to the world, this micro-credential would be great for you. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you again next week. Have a great day. Thanks.